Starliner gets another chance.
Are we going to nuke the moon?
And China is not messing around.
And we talk about the role of space planes in the race for the moon and for Mars. All that coming up on this episode of Orbital Edge. Welcome to this episode of Orbital Edge News. My name is Jacob. This is episode 2.4. This is Chad, our host, and Emma.
Hi.
And over off to the side, we have Linda. All right, it's time to hear about some recent launches. Chad, what do you got for us?
All right, we got plenty of launches that happened last week. Jams, go ahead and roll the footage of the Falcon 9 that had just launched this morning.
T-10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Engines full power and liftoff. Go Piper, go Falcon.
Normally, Blue Origin is supposed to be scheduled to deliver these Amazon satellites. However, the New Glenn rocket's not quite ready to deliver these satellites.
You know, Chad, it's kind of funny that SpaceX is sending off their rivals' satellites rather than their own. You know, SpaceX has a program just like this, Starlink.
Yeah, and my only thing is it's contextually to save money. I mean, any company who's launching is going to try to figure out a way to save money, even if they were contracted to launch it themselves. So again, they don't have their New Glenn rocket quite ready to lift these Kuiper satellites. So what better backup plan is to launch it on a cheap Falcon 9. So for our second launch on the list, we've got a G-Long 3.
Now, structural integrity with these kinds of, I mean, you can see that happening.
Yeah, that's frozen cryogenic
not good.
because they prevent boil off, so it's frozen onto the side of the rocket. So when it goes up, it falls off.
So that was intentional.
Pretty much. This launch, again, is the G-Long 3, launching the Geely constellation. And this is a sea launch. This is something rare we see it coming out of China. This launch occurred on August 8th, 2025, 1631 Universal Coordinated Time. And this is a 4-stage solid-fueled rocket. And the payload is the low Earth orbit communication satellites for a Chinese car manufacturer, Geely Automotive. And this is for testing autonomous driving and inter-vehicle communication services. They also carried payloads for ocean observation, the Tianqi 21 and 22, and some other small sats from a Mobile Sea platform. And we have a launch from an Electron rocket. This is definitely some incredible footage here. Really good detail on the sparks coming off of that. This launch occurred on August 5th, 2025, 0410 Universal Coordinated Time, and RocketLabs Electron deployed UPS SAR-12, an Earth observation satellite for the Capella space from Mahia Launch Complex 1B, New Zealand.
You also have to think like the launch platform, getting it up there in New Zealand is going to be very difficult. New Zealand's super rocky and the terrain is not easy.
It is a beautiful launch site, though.
Yes.
I envy that launch site, too. All the palm trees.
Oh, yeah. It must be paradise out there.
Seems to be a pretty similar rocket to the G-Long 3, huh?
Oh, no.
Most of the launchers from China have kind of a similar look. And they have that typical fairing style that kind of looks like the old Delta IIs.
Yeah. What I like about their design is that they have ample room for their payload. That usually gets the job done.
And this launch did occur on August 4th, 2025, 0545 UTC. And this is China's new medium lift rocket. And it carried the low Earth orbit internet satellite from Wenchang Launch Complex 201. And this is its first coastal launch. So this launch complex I'm actually not quite familiar with. And now let's move on to some space news.
So, how do we feel about nukes on the moon? Yeah, that's right. Nuclear reactors could be headed to the moon very soon. No, we're not going to see nuclear weapons or nuclear warheads of any kind, but NASA does seem to be keen on putting a nuclear reactor on the moon. Why? Well, it makes a lot of sense actually. It's really hard to get power on the moon. And that's because the moon rotates very slowly, about once every 2 weeks. So solar power doesn't really work. You'd have to have massive batteries and massive solar fields to harness enough solar energy to stick around long enough to survive those 2-week long nights. Now, you also have the issue with wind, in that the moon doesn't really have any wind, so you can't really use any wind energy. So, how are you going to create power on the moon? Well, nuclear's kind of the answer. Sean Duffy, the new NASA administrator, showed up a few weeks ago per Trump's request. He is also the Department of Transportation Secretary. This is his first major announcement. He wants to put a nuclear reactor on Mars to supply the Artemis missions with enough power to do what they need to do. And it also acts as a little bit of a geopolitical tool. Now, the United States will be staking a claim on a specific section of the moon by putting their nuclear reactor there. Other countries will know that that section of the moon is now claimed, kind of like how we've put bases on Antarctica, even though it's technically a free zone without any people supposed to be in charge of it. But this nuclear reactor is going to supply the Artemis missions. It should arrive on the moon around 2030.
So when I heard about this, I was kind of like, should I include this in the show? And the reason why I was thinking this is because I think Sean Duffy really thought of something that may be too lofty of a goal. It's kind of like if you were writing the last chapter of a book and then skipped out on writing all the beginning chapters. But I was just wondering, how did he arrive at a nuclear reactor on the moon while skipping everything up to it? So what is it going to power? I know he arrived at 120 kilowatts, I believe.
Well,
Yeah,
Chad, I might add a little bit of pushback to that. It seems like this is actually the first chapter in the Artemis's mission to the moon, rather than writing the last chapter first. And what I mean by that is by putting a nuclear reactor there, we start the process of getting man to Mars. You can't have a mission go to the moon, but this applies to Mars as well. You can't have people go live on the moon if they don't have power. So we have to put the power source there first before we get humans there, or we have to send it with them when we go.
Also, it's better to be safe than sorry when it comes to power. I mean, there could be other alternatives besides nuclear, but if nuclear is all we got, then that's what we got.
And that is actually a really good point. I just wanted to touch up on one last thing about that. Putting a nuclear power reactor on the moon might be seen as, from the Russians or Chinese, as maybe territorial issues, because there is a thing called the Outer Space Treaty, which does actually prevent other countries from using nuclear weapons on any other celestial bodies or any other weapons of mass destruction, or even to place these things in orbit around the Earth. So installing anything with that could explode is, no country would ever agree with it, and it's also it stretches the arms of warfare rather than scientific exploration. So we just hope that the end game here is still international exploration, and of course with all mankind. And if anybody's seen the show For All Mankind, it's a really good show. I do recommend it. So I do want to move on to some space news that I'm going to go over. First, we have a static fire from the Neutron's Archimedes engine by RocketLabs. Go ahead and let's watch this footage right here.
Wow.
The thing sounds so epic.
Looks like a rainbow.
Those are shock diamonds.
Yep.
Occurring on the... Obviously, this is a higher, faster than sound combustion, so you get little shock diamonds from the nozzle. Very interesting physics.
What forms those shock diamonds, for example, is think of like the reflection of the thrust bouncing in that bell of the engine nozzle. They kind of bounce at angles and then they end up meeting each other at each of those diamond points. Really, this is a sign of a pretty much a healthy engine. You know, it's going to have really good specific inputs.
Yeah, here's
For
and like what's like the
If you ever seen like the fighter jets taking off, like, and you see those little rings coming off of the exhaust of it, that's basically what's happening here. But instead of with an air-fed thrust, now it's just completely combustion.
yeah,
that's what I'm talking about.
And we had a question from our editor, Jan. So the blue flames actually mean a higher temperature and combustion. That's why you see them blue. The red flames are lower temperature, but that's just because they have these nozzles spraying water over it. But it makes sense. Like a blue flame is a hotter flame. Yellow flame is less hot. Oh, and now we're done with our test.
smoking.
Wow, okay, so that was really nice. So if you guys have any questions, put it down below in the comments. Feel free to directly message us. We were happy to explain everything because we are here to educate you, the viewer.
And Chad, can you give us the rest of the space news?
Yes, but it's not great news. We lost another Apollo astronaut last weekend. And Jim Lovell passed at the age of 97. He was involved in 2 Gemini flights, Gemini 7 and 12, and he was on Apollo 8 and 13. And those 2 flights were pretty famous flights. Apollo 8 took the first crew around the moon, and Apollo 13 was the infamous mission that had things not go right. And Houston, they definitely had some problems. And he was the commander on Apollo 13, and he was known as someone who could hold it together. He was also played, for that Apollo 13 movie by actor Tom Hanks.
Great film, truly.
Yes, if you love 1960s nostalgia and spaceflight, that is definitely a perfect movie to watch. It's definitely a classic. I do highly recommend it. All right, and with that said, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, more space news. Stay tuned. Don't go away. Welcome back. Emma's got some amazing news from what's going on in China.
So China successfully completed their first takeoff and verification test of the Lanyu lunar lander on August 6, 2025. Jam, can we play the clip, please? So I think this might be a really good example of slow and steady wins the race. What they're doing here is just using proven methods from Apollo and other kind of unmanned launch or approaches to the moon. And
yeah, that brown smoke you're seeing from that is toxic fuel. So if you see that, you don't want to go near that. But that's a hypergolic fuel, which means 2 different fuel mixtures coming together, causing a combustion.
So it's kind of like the fuel version of mustard gas.
basically.
More or less.
And according to CCTV, this was just built for astronauts from lunar surface to orbit. Just a one-way trip. It's not really meant for people to stay on these little pods. They're in fact a lot smaller than the Apollo landers, and they're not really built for accommodations or anything of the sort. So let's compare it to Starship's HLS. So this is going to be able to do a lunar stay for around 6 hours. The planned HLS enables a 7-day lunar stay with multiple EVAs, cruise transfers, and a return to lunar orbit. Compared to Blue Origin Mark II, it can carry up to which can carry up to 4 astronauts. This can carry about 2. The Blue Origin Mark II can stay for 30 days. Has a reusable tug for refueling in orbit. This loses everything once it's taking off from the moon. And basically, the point of this is that China's kind of getting a good start on their landing parameters and how they're going to approach the moon. They're trying to build off of already proven technology and just sticking with it, which I think it's good. If it works, it works. Now, for long periods and things of that nature, I don't know if this is going to be the best kind of capsule, but China, that's how they like to use, that's how they approach things, is just get it done, get it good, and go home.
So, Emma, when do they plan on using this?
So once they have their heavy lift rockets more or less perfected, because right now we've only seen small and medium payloads kind of taking off, they maybe by the time that the SLS is already launched, a lot of things coming from China are a little bit of a mystery, but we'll get to see with how they react to the SLS, and maybe they'll even be the first. Who knows?
Yeah, China's usually known to let us know at the last minute what they're up to. So this is really cool to see a lunar lander come to fruition.
Yes.
So that's going to wrap up the space news. We're going to finally move on to the topic of the show. Space planes, do they have a role in the next 10 to 20 years for the race to the moon and Mars? My thoughts on this are, I think space planes are going to continue to be used in low Earth orbit, probably to carry astronauts to the International Space Station. Well, not for too long, because they are going to deorbit the International Space Station. So the Dream Chaser spacecraft by Sierra Space is supposed to be flying. They are behind schedule, but that would be an example of one space plane that is supposed to be carrying astronauts to the International Space Station.
Now, Chad, hold on a second. What are space planes?
Awesome question. And for our new spaceflight fans, they're not rockets, but they're planes with rockets on them, basically. They're meant to fly vertically and then land horizontally on a runway.
A lot like space shuttles, effectively.
Yes, and the space shuttle, which is retired, was a form of a space plane. And here's a fun fact. The Russians even had their own shuttle called the Buran, and right now there's one chilling in a hangar, rotting in a hangar somewhere in Russia.
Now, Chad, I would like to mention that the reason that we don't really expect space planes to have much of a reason to go to Mars would be the fact that they can't land on Mars. You need a runway, or the moon for that matter. Until a runway is built on the moon or Mars, you couldn't really put a space plane there.
Right. So the situation there is there's going to be no use for a space plane on the moon. Of course, there's no atmosphere, so it's kind of useless. The way space planes are designed, they're asymmetrical. So the propulsion on them, they would need really strong thrusters to keep it flying straight, just the way the weight ratio turns out to be. But for Mars, this is where things get a little bit tricky. There is a thin atmosphere in Mars. Does that mean that you can just take like a space shuttle and land it on Mars? No, but there is a way to still do it, because one example that the Mars Ingenuity helicopter proved to us is that you can fly on Mars. You just need bigger wings or very large propellers.
So why wouldn't we just use a space helicopter instead of a space plane?
That would be great use to ferry local areas, maybe from habitat to habitat, things like that. Of course, they're not going to do any orbital operations. So that's where maybe some sort of it could still be viable for a space plane to take off from a Martian runway and then dock to a Martian orbital built space station. So that could be the future, within, 15, 20 years. But we'll see what happens here with our actual realistic Mars plans, which of course is being spearheaded by SpaceX with its Starship.
I mean, we've been seeing probes using the Martian atmosphere to slow themselves down. I think the harder question is, how do you get this supposed helicopter down to the Martian atmosphere without breaking all of the propellers off? I think that'd be very interesting to see how people approach that kind of problem.
Yeah, and there'll be more engineering behind developing larger helicopters as well, because any data they got from the Ingenuity helicopter, you never bet against JPL. They can always make something happen. I mean, they've landed a rover that's the size of an SUV using a sky crane that basically reeled down the rover onto the surface and then cut the cord and then just flew away. So if they can do that, I have my utmost faith that they can build really cool helicopters for Mars.
I think we should just turn back the dial on time a little bit. No space planes, no space helicopters. Space hot air balloons.
Ooh.
This is a good idea, I promise.
The unsung hero of space. Yeah.
Alrighty, Chad. What's next?
Well, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, comments from last show. Stay tuned, don't go away. And welcome back. We've reached escape velocity, which means that's the conclusion of the show. Before we go, the answer to the orbital trivia is answer A, the shuttle Enterprise. Now, a lot of people probably chose Columbia, but the reason why that's wrong is because the Enterprise actually was test flown as a glider up on top of a 747 plane to just test to see if it could glide on a runway successfully. So with that said, if you enjoyed this episode, you can support us in the future by participating in our discussions on social media and on the show. And also don't forget to comment and subscribe. We will see you next time. Bye.
Bye.